Okay, good Erev Shabbos. We saw yesterday that the din of the Mishnah of a person acting upon Horoy Bezdin paskins that Chaylev is muta, and the person acts upon it, even if it's a miyat of Kal Yisrael, where Bezdin is not going to bring the carbon. Our Mishnah said Yapata. We said yesterday that's the das of Rabbi Yehuda, but the Rabbanon are of the opinion that you're still chayiv, right? And we saw a brisa and how the brisa extrapolated it. We spoke at the Noida Yehuda to explain why you chayiv. Today we're going to come to a very, very interesting idea. Bezdin paskins, it's muta. Bezdin then realizes a mistake, but a person acts upon the original psak. What's the din? What's the din? A person's acting upon the original psak. What's the din? Says the Mishnah. Well, first we're learning for Fur Shalema for Hadassah Bela Bas Frumet Rachel, and for Yonis and David ben Devoira Rachel, and for Fur Shalema Elimelech Zev ben Rachel. Tell George after 3 times he has to pay. Hoira Bezdin v'yadu shetoyu. Bezdin paskins that chaylev is muta. Okay, Bezdin paskins that chaylev is muta. V'yadu shetoyu, and they find out that they made a mistake. V'chazru behem, and now they take back their psak. Bein she'eviu kaparasa and bein she'le'eviu kaparasa, and whether they brought, and most of the kahal acted upon it, right? Because whether they brought the kapara or didn't bring the kapara. V'holachas al pihem, and this individual goes and acts upon the original psak. Reb Shimon paita, Reb Shimon says yapata. In other words, Reb Shimon is of the opinion, toilet bezdin is pata, even if what? Bezdin realized their mistake. Reb Elazar Amas Suffolk. Reb Elazar says, Reb Elazar is of the opinion that it's a suffix. It's a suffix if it's considered like toilet b'das bezdin, or it's a suffix where it's considered b'das atzmai. Now, since it's a suffix, you're going to bring an asham taloi. Since it's a suffix, you're going to bring an asham taloi. Okay? So again, says, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he needs a kapara because he's toilet b'atzmai. I don't know if he doesn't need a kapara because he's toilet b'das bezdin. Memela what? You're going to go ahead and... Now, this is, guys, this is a little different than the classic Asham Toli. The classic Asham Toli is, I'm not sure I did an Aveira, but the Aveira was present. In other words, I have in front of me, I have Chaylev and I have Shumin. I eat, but I don't know which one I ate. But there, with Isra was there. Over here, there's a Shiloh whether there was an Isra or not. It's a different type of Asham Toli, guys. You're here. It's not exactly the same. Okay. Ezo Suffolk. So which is the suffix that you're going to bring an asham taloi? Why is chayv an asham taloi? So yashav lo b'toich beisai, he's sitting at home. Bezdin retracts. So we assume that if he's sitting at home, the news could get to him. He's not on the road, right? He's around people. If Bezdin retracted and he didn't find out, that's toilet b'das atzmoi and chayiv. However, halach loy Lemedinas Hayam, if be on the road, then potter. He'd be potter, because how was he supposed to find out? So if he ate chaylev on the road, you'd be potter. Why? Because how's he supposed to find out? Mashenkin, if he ate in his house, he should have been able to find out that Bezdin had retracted the psak. Amr Rabbi Akiva, moida ani bezeh, a moida shu karv liftoi min achayva. Right? It's karv to be potter from the chayv because he's what? He's on the road. Amar loy ben Azai, maishna zeh. What's the difference? Why, if he's on the road, is there a difference? So Rabbi Kiva says, if he's sitting at home, it's possible for him to hear the news. But he's on the road, not. So that's the dialogue between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Azai. Okay, so that's the first Mishnah. In the Mishnayos, this is the second Mishnah. Bezdin, again, we're dealing with the carbon Helam Davashel Tzibor, where Bezdin is going to go ahead and paskin in an Inyane Karis that it's muta, and people act upon it. Now we're going to get what exactly is the psak that they gave. So, for example, Amru ein nida b'tayra. We know a person's going to need this a chi of karis. They say there's no such halacha of nida. Ein Shabbos b'tayra. There's no such halacha of Shabbos. Ein avodas kechavim b'tayra. There's no halacha of avodas zar b'tayra. Harielu p'turim, right? they will be pata from being the carbon. Guys, this is not the parhelam davashat tzibor. In other words, if they uproot a whole halacha from the Torah, they uproot 630, one of the 613 piturin from the helam dava. Pitur, they're not going to bring it. It's not. We'll see a few opinions why. What is an example of psak that would be, in fact, what they'd have to bring parhelam dava? Hor levatel miktsas ulakayim miktsas. Hariel chayavim. If they go ahead and they say to be Makayim Miktsas and be Mavatal Miktsas. And we'll give examples of that in a second. So that's the Hira. If it's to take out a whole shtickle Torah, you're taking out the whole mitzvah, then what? Then you're going to be Pata. If they keep the mitzvah, but they go ahead and say part of the mitzvah doesn't apply, that's when they're going to bring it. Here's 3 examples. Ketzad. Amu yeshni de b'Torah, aval habal shemeres yoim kenega yoim Pata. Okay, we know that a nida midaraisa, fellas, is the idea. 7 days she sees blood, she's a nida for those 7 days. If it stops after 7 days, we begin the 11 days of zivis, that which she can possibly be zava. If she continues to see after the 7th day, she shemeres yoim keneged yoim. So if she sees on day 8, she watches day 9. Good. So let's say Bezdin would paskin that there's no din of shemeres yoim keneged yoim. So the Kayim Miktsas, they didn't say there's no such thing as a Nida, but they will mevatel one aspect of Nida, the one of Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom. You hear? They're keeping the halacha of Nida, but they're going ahead and they mevatel what? The din of Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom. The Gemara is going to ask, l'chayri, that's also stated in the Torah openly. And we're going to have to go ahead and adjust that. But right now, for all intents and purposes, that will be an example of what? Of Kiyam Miktsas, ubatal miktsas. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. There's a din of Shabbos. However, aval ha'moitzi mishus hayachid u'shus harabim pata. So I'm not saying there's no din of Shabbos. I'm saying there's no din of Eitzah. The Gemara is going to ask this. When I say Eitzah, it's not. So you're saying your Kayim mixes Shabbos and your batal mixes part of it, but in fact you're uprooting a whole chelik of Torah. So the Gemara is going to ask that. Yesh avodas chachavim b'Torah aval mishtacheveh pata. There's a din of avodah zarah in the Torah, but someone who bows down to his pata. Hariel chayavim shenemar v'nelam davar, right? V'nelam davar, v'nelam davar. They go ahead and the matter davar is hidden. Davar v'loy kol aguf. Davar, part of it. V'nelam davar. Again, the pasuk says v'im kol adas Yisrael yishku v'nelam adava me'enei ha'am. When it goes ahead, me'enei ha'kahal. So it says v'nelam davar. So with dashing nelam, what's nelam? A davar, but not the whole thing. Okay. Again, the Gemara is going to revisit that l'chayra. Each one of these is the whole thing, right? Okay. So we'll see Bez Hashem. Okay. What's the first din of the Mishnah? The first din we had, if the Bez din, they go ahead, they blow the psak, they change their mind. This guy acts upon the original psak. Says Rav Shimon Yapata. Says Rav Laz, it's a suffix, and Rav Eliezer, it's a suffix. You can bring an Hashem Talmud. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. My time with Rav Shimon that Yapata. Hoyalu b'shus bezdin u'oisa. Okay, since he acted b'shus bezdin. Ikedi Amri Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Oy mahay Rav Shimon kol hayra sheyoytze b'roiv tzibor yachir oisa sepata lefish leinin hayra ella have to make shayig lemezid. The purpose of hayra is to discern between shayig lemezid. Let's look at Rashi on the right side, about 6 lines up. The reason for is hasra is to whether or no the person is b'shaygeg. Oh, I didn't know that, and it'll stop. Or b'mezid, I don't care. In other words, the purpose, literally, the purpose is to discern. This person acted upon the hayra. In other words, if the purpose is to be mafkin, clearly over here, right? Clearly over here, there's no havchana that he could have possibly done a b'mezid, because the only reason I would say he's eating chaylev is because Bezdin said go ahead and eat chaylev. Okay, v'yachid sh'asa baraz Bezdin pata, right? Okay, we'll keep the first pshat. Okay, either way we have pshat, and that's the way we understood it. That if you act upon hayraz Bezdin, even right. Your pata, that's it. Your pata. Okay. Said Rabbi Eliezer, it's a suffix. It's a suffix where the guys, it's toilet b'das atzmai and ischayev, or toilet b'das bezdin, yipata. And then we went ahead and said, what would the difference be if he's home or on the road? That was Rabbi Akiva. Meisive, we're going to ask. Par helam davishal tzibor, v'usirei avodas kechavim, these unique karbanis, b'tchila goyven aleim, div Reb Shimon. You know when you collect them when you're over on them. In other words, Pasha Shkolim fellas, when they would collect the money, Pasha Shkolim, when they would collect the money for what? For the tzibor, for the karbanis, they didn't collect for that. They didn't collect for that. Even though it's a carbon ticket tzibor, they didn't collect for that. Why? Because there's no assumption they're going to be over on that. Once you're over on that, you're going to collect. Frag the Gemara, Leit Rav Shimon, how can you tell me that he's toilet b'das atzmai if they're collecting? They find out, hey, by the way, buddy, you know what? So l'chayra, if he would know, and therefore if he acted upon it, it would be toilet b'das atzmai and not toilet b'das bezdin. As I read the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda, said Rabbi Yehuda, no. You know where they collect from? They would just they had plenty of money in the Trumas Halishka, from the baskets that they took out of the Lishka. Remember they had Fort Knox. And in Fort Knox, they would take a truma. Truma means a separation. You'd have a basket. From that basket, if necessary, they would take out the cereal, but it's a chavim with a parhel and dava. Now there's no way of you knowing, right? Because they're not announcing it now. So Reb Shimon would be good if he holds like Reb Yehuda, but Reb Shimon says no. You collected it now, so you collected it now. He had the knowledge of it. So how in the world can you say no? What? He doesn't know about it. As I read the Gemara. Am I? Kivin the Gavi Lahu Havile Hoida, he knows about it. Ibay Yisemi one teretz, going Shagav Ustam. They didn't announce why they're collecting. They didn't announce. In other words, making a Gavia, an anonymous Gavia. Maybe they don't want to embarrass Bezdin, right? And make an anonymous Gavia, very geschmack. Okay, make an anonymous Gavia, and therefore he would know. Ibay Yisemi could go in. He wasn't in the city when they made the collection. He wasn't there. Ibay Yisemi, Rav Kidach Tana. He was like a different brisa. The Tanya Ibcha. B'tchila goyven lehem de Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon I'm Mitchumas Alishka. Very geschmack. If Shimon holds like Mitchumas Alishka, there's no way of him knowing, and therefore what? So we have a few terutzim. Either what they didn't. It was stam, or he wasn't in the city, or the opinion that he holds takas Mitchumas Alishka. Very good. So Baruch Hashem. Tani Reb Meir Mechayev. So now you have a case where this guy is chayta. If the Bezdin retracted. Good. So Bezdin said Chaylev is muta. Bezdin retracts. After retraction of Bezdin, he eats. Good. Reb Meir Mechayev. Says Reb Meir, you're going to be chayev. Reb Shimon Paita. Reb Shimon says you're going to be pata. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer Suffolk. So we introduce a new, in the Brisa guys, we're introducing a third Tana. In the Mishnah, we only had Reb Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer. We have a Reb Meir saying Yechayev, right? Which is one of the pshatim in the chart. Reb Meir, if you remember, that the first pshat was Asu. Reb Meir is the one who says Yechayev, right? Very geschmack. So therefore now, so Reb Meir Mechayev, Reb Shimon Paita, Reb Eliezer Aimer Safek. Now Mishum Sumchis Ama Toli. So what's the difference between Reb Eliezer and Sumchis? They both seemingly saying that it's a suffix. Rabbi Yochanan, Ashim Toli Ikibinayu. The Ashim Toli is, Rabbi Eliezer would say you bring an Ashim Toli, and Simcha says you don't. Simcha says Toli, but you don't bring what? You don't bring an Ashim Toli. That's what. Rabbi Zera, Mashal the Rabbi Eliezer that you're going to bring an Ashim Toli, Lamahadav Adoimer, La'adam Sha'achal Safik Chelik Safik Shumin. Right? He ate, and we don't know whether it was kosher fat called Shumin, or tray fat called chalev. V'noidala, and it becomes notin that he ate it. So maybe Ashim Tali. He's going to be an Ashim. Now, guys, he knows he ate it, but he doesn't know if it was chalev or shumin. We're going to see we're going to Bes Hashem get to Kachim that an Ashim Tali protects you until you have a yediyah. If you find out later that in fact it was chalev, you'd have to bring a chatas. This, in other words, Ashim Tali is not a kapara. An Ashim Tali is protection. You see that when you eat something, I always say that my cholas yisuros are such a shver avero. You don't realize it that even b'shoigeg. And we spoke about Timtum Alev. We spoke about that because Baruch Hu doesn't let tzaddikim do averis. Which avera? He won't let them eat something. Where Gamliel in the beginning of Gittin, he almost ate Avim and Achai. And it says, how's that possible? It's because he almost ate it. So you see that when it comes to Mechalos Yisuris. So over here, if you would eat chaylev, it's a terrible thing. So what do you see? It's very geschmack. You have to bring a korban to go ahead and protect you until you find out. Most Averis, you don't say that. But you see, the severity of Mechalos Yisuris is it's a very meduyik. It's a very shver thing. The fact that you bring this unique korban to go ahead and protect you. Okay, so that's Rabbi Eliezer. Now, v'loimi boy lemanda omai tzibur maisi, and you don't need to tell me that the tzibur. But the question is who brings the parhel and dava. Again, this is sugyas later on. So we were introduced to it yesterday. Does the tzibur bring it, or does Bezdin bring it, and even who pays for it? So v'loimi boy lemanda omai tzibur maisi the mefarsim milsa. In other words, it's Pearson that he ate chaylev that's muta, that's asa. Elafilu maniyama best mevian the lemon frasim milsa. He havi shol havi amen if he would have asked. So in other words, you're shuld. Since you're shuld, and therefore it's not clear that it's tola bedas besdin. Since you could have asked, you're going to bring nashim tali. That's the opinion of Rabbi Zera's mashal to explain Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida. Mashal the Sumchas Lamahad David Diamond. Now Sumchas says Tali, but you don't bring a carbon, right? Sumchas says Tali, but you don't bring a carbon. That's what Sumchas said. You're bringing a carbon chatas. Bein hashmashas is no man's land. If you bring it during the day, it's a good carbon. If you bring it at night, it's not a good carbon. You're bringing it bein hashmashas. So now you don't know. And bein hashmashas, guys, is keheref ayin. It's lamish mamish. Bein hashmashas is like this. So he brings the bein hashmashas. Safik b'yoyim nischapaloi. Safik mishachashecha nischapaloi. Sheim maybe ashim tali. You're not going to bring an ashim tali in that situation, right? And so too over here, I don't know whether when I ate it, whether I knew or I did know. Not even Madi Amar at Bezdin that you don't have Pearson because Bezdin is bringing it privately that you don't know. Even Madi Amar says that Tzibur brings it in Mefarsim so that it's publicized. The Hacha in other words, it's not normal to ask what Bezdin is up to. You don't ask what Bezdin is up to. So even later Madi Amar that says that the tzibur is going to bring it. It's no clarity that you did something wrong because it doesn't make. You're not going to ask any questions. So Memela says sumchis. It blibes like not a vaday toilet b'das atzmai or even a suffix toilet b'das atzmai. So if tali, it's tali. Whatever tali means, it means you're not doing anything. But you're not. What's this important? So tali, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly. Chayev we know. Pata we know. What does tali mean? Okay, I'm not exactly clear on that, what tali means. Let's go back maybe, see a little bit. Let's see Rashi on the Omid Beis that we just finished. Go up. Bein Rebbe Eliezer the Sumchus Eino maybe Yashim Tali. The Hachikam as Sumchus. This is what Sumchus is saying. Maisa Shaloi Talihu. His action is Tali. And you can't say that maybe he did the Avera that he was told ba'atzmai. Lehavi barchiyav ma'alya. Because he's not barchiyav. The heicha the havi lefon of chaticha achas suffix shachelik suffix shel shumin v'achlu bedinu de mevi ashim tali. Mishum de ikla meima shema chelav mamish. This is, guys, the chelik I made. Aval the havi barchiyav ma'alya hacha lekala meima. You can't say why because Shema Toilib Atzmai Mamishu Shayapia Rahu Oisa Hilkach Maisa Shaloi Tolihu Litzad Chiv Shaloi Tolihu Lehavit Sad Chiv Ma'alya Hilkach Ina maybe Ashim Toli. In other words, there is a clarity by Ashim Toli that you know there was Issa there, there's Chaylev there. Over here, what's the Tzad? There's no clarity that even we would have known. We couldn't have known. So and therefore, what it's totally. I mean, we can't be toilet in a chiyuv. That's pshad in. Why does he use lashon of pata? Again, I'm throwing that out again. Clearly, he's not bringing a carbon. But on the other hand, so if he's not bringing a carbon, where is he? So it totally seems to be like in a suspended animation, right? It's like seems to be somewhere. Okay, I just thought about it now, so I'll have to do a little research. Okay, but we have the clarity. Four shittas. Rabbi is chayiv toilet b'das. If you eat, if Bezdin retracted, Rabbi is chayiv. Rabbi Shimon Yipata. Rabbi Eliezer is a suffix. I think it's a chiddush that you're going to bring an ashim toli, even though you don't know for sure you did an avera. Versus mamash eating the possibility where the presence of avera is there, and that's sumchas. Since this is different, there may have not been an avera at all. Over there, there's chayil v'shumin, so it's a suffix. Did I or didn't I? Over here, maybe there's no suffix at all, because maybe there was no avera at all, because there wasn't maybe it's saratzmai, because you weren't supposed to know about it. Okay, those are the four shittas. Amul ben Azai, Maishno min Yoshev. So why did Rabbi Akiva answer Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai, you want to know the difference. Why if he's on the road, not in the city, yes, right? On the road, in the city, you could find out. On the road, not necessarily. So says the Gemara, Shapek Hamalei Rabbi Akiva ben Azai. L'chayra, he says very good. L'chayra, he's saying very good to Ben Azai. Amarava, Hichzik b'derech ikabinav. You know what the difference is? If he's packing his bags. He's packing his bags. Did you ever try to speak to somebody? They have to leave for the airport and they're speaking, and someone gets on the phone and says, "Do you have any time for me?" If you're packing for the airport, you are ready for plunge it. You're so famished. It's so crazy. So that's the Ezra's Gemara. Hichzik b'derech. He didn't go out yet. He's still in the city. But Liben Azai chayiv. The basis, he's still in the house. No, it's Ben Azai would be moed if he's mamish on the road. Yitaka would be potter, but he holds ice since you're in the city. Ken Zain, you'll figure it out. Rabbi Akiva potter the hichzik b'derech. You know lashon hichzik b'derech. You're already on the derech even when you're in the house. It's a geshmak lashon. Hichzik b'derech means it's masha yomachs, but you didn't leave yet. It's the same thing with the airport, right? I think it's a very good parish. So now that was the first Mishnah. The second Mishnah, we said if Nida Shabbos Avodah Zarah, right? And he tells them that any one of those doesn't exist, then you're going to be what? You're going to be Horayos Bezin Laka Es Kol Aguf Tan Rabbanan. V'nelam. Just 1 second, guys. I have to go do something for a second, okay? Okay, so again, guys, the three venues, what were they? Nida, Shabbos, Avodah Zarah. And if they paskin that there's no Nida, there's no Avodah Zarah, and there's no what, and there's no Show Shabbos, they're potter. Because why? It says V'nelam Dava. If they paskin, there's no Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom. If they paskin that Shabbos is no din of Eitzah. If they paskin by Avodah Zarah, is no problem bowing down. That itself they be chayiv. Now the Gemara is going to shtel sich on this. L'chayre, each one of those is mamish. You're being oika Shabbos. You're being oika. They're all in the Torah, guys. So says the Gemara. Hoyloi bez makras kolakov tanarbana. It says v'nelam davar. Again, this is the pasuk you got to know. Vayikra dalid pasuk yud gimel. Vayikra dalid pasuk yud gimel. V'im kol adas Yisrael yishku. V'nelam adavar me'enei hakahal. Kahal is Sanhedrin. V'osu achas mikol mitzvahs asher lo yisasena v'ashen. And they do one of the mitzvahs. V'nelam dava, v'lo sheyakar ha-mitzvah kula. Only a davar, a matter, but not that you're oika the whole mitzvah. That's what we're learning from the words v'nelam dava, and that was the pasuk we brought in the Mishnah. Ketzad amru ein nida b'toira, ein Shabbos b'toira, ein avodas kachav b'toira. Yachli echayavim to bring a carbon parallel davar tamalayma v'nelam dava v'lo tishis alem mitzvah kula. And not that one, a whole mitzvah is forgotten. Hari elu b'turim. Avol amru yesh nida b'toira. Aval habal shemeres yom keneged yom pata yesh Shabbos b'toira. Aval moitzi mishus hayachlu mishus harabim pata yesh avodas kachavim b'toira. Aval mishtach ve'pata yachal yeh peturin. I might think you pata from the from the parhelam dava tamulayma v'nelam dava v'lei kol guf. Okay, that's the what. That is the brisa. Again, the brisa a little more elaborate than the Mishnah. Amamar, going back over the brisa, yachal yeh peturin. Now you're telling me that what I might think you pata. Talmud loyma that what you chayiv. The ibikiyam miktsas ubitl miktsvas peturim ubakiris kol aguf peturim the ma'chayavim. If you're telling me, fellas, yachli peturim, right? I might think you're potter. How could you have a havamina you're potter by there to tell me chayiv, fellas? If you're potter by there, you're always guys. Listen, what did you say? You said the following: Nida you're potter. If the guy says there's no need in the Torah, you're potter. If the guy says there's no shemeres yom k'neged yom, I might think you're potter. Talmud leiman elam dav yechayev. Why would I need a pasuk to tell me yechayev if you're potter there? Then there's no din of par helam dav at all. It never exists. But in other words, by default, it has to be yechayev. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. By default, yechayev. Or else, where does it exist? Such an animal. Pun intended, right? Where does it exist? Very geshmak akasha. Says the Amamar, Yachle Peturim, V'Ibikia mixes a bitl mixes Peturim. If you're going to be where you keep part of the mitzvah and you move out to the other ones, you pata, Ubakir is called a guf Peturim, b'may chayavim. When are you ever going to be chayiv? And for the Gemara, Tana Hachi, Kakashale. Here was his problem. Ema, Dava Kula Milsa Mashma. When it says Davar, it's mashma everything. In other words, you have to be oiker everything. That's what I would think. Talmud loima v'nelam davar, right? No, not everything, just part of it. So v'nelam davar is, in other words, I might think that you're potter if you go ahead, and you're if only nelam davar, if part the whole thing, that's when you're chayiv. Talmud loima, no, you're only chayiv when it's part, but the whole thing you would be potter. Now, where do you see it? Tamaloima v'nelam davar, my mashma. How's it mashma v'nelam davar, guys, is part of it? Guys, if you tell me davar means kula, how does v'nelam davar mean part? In other words, if you have a havamina, what changed your havamina? What leaves that havamina? If it's havamina, you're potter. My amaula koribe v'nelam mi davar. Guys, if you take the word v'nelam, you take the mem. So we're going to use a little cut and paste over here. The mem, the last letter of the mem, will become the first letter of what? In addition to being the last letter of the mem, it'll be the first letter of davar. V'nelam mi davar. What does mi davar mean, guys? Miktsas davar. We always focus on that, right? Mi davar. V'nelam mi davar. Part of it, not all of it. So that's the first limud. That's how you know miktsas. V'nelam davar mi davar. Chizkiya says, Amakra, the end of the pasuk. What does it say at the end of the pasuk? V'yasu achas mikol mitzvahs, mikol mitzvahs, v'loy kol mitzvahs. No, it's part of the mitzvah, but not the whole mitzvah. Fred the Gemara, mitzvahs tarti mashma. Guys, I'll say it means like this. Guys, I'll read the pasuk like this. V'im kol adas Yisrael v'yishku v'nelam adava me'enei kahal v'yasu mikol mitzvahs. In other words, you didn't do the whole mitzvah of Shabbos. You didn't do the whole mitzvah of Avodah Zarah. You didn't do the whole mitzvah of Nida. Mitzvah is mashma tarti. If you read it that way, then you don't know what miktsas and the whole. Mitzvah is mashma, a whole mitzvah. If so, how can you Chizkiya learn from Achas Mikol Mitzvahs? On that, the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, mitzvahs ksiv. We always speak about a ksiv and a kri. If you wanted to say plural, it would have said mem tzadik vav saf, and then you read it as mitzvos. But since it only says one vav, I can read it as achas mitzvahs and not a plural. And melawat, part of a mitzvah. So either we're going to learn it out from what the nela midavar, the mem being midavar, or mitzvahs versus mitzvos, and therefore part of the mitzvah. That's when you bring the parhelim davar. Rav Ashi, a third b'shad Amar. Yolif David Mizakim Mamre. Okay, we're familiar with the Zakim Mamre. We just met him the other day again. He goes there, he paskins, goes to Bezdin Agadol, and then goes back home and paskins his way, and it says you can act upon it, right? What does it say there? Ki poli memcha davar. When something will be poli, separate from you. Davar. Like sasim in adavar asher yagidu lecha. Yom small. So the Zakim Mamre, by the Zakim Mamre, fellas, it's over there. It's not the whole mitzvah, it's part of the mitzvah. So in other words, guys, if the Zakim Mamre would say there's no such thing as tefillin, he won't be a Zakim Mamre. If you'd say there are 5 compartments to the tefillin, then he's a Zakim Mamre. So what do you see? By the Zakim Mamre, you're not oiker the whole mitzvah, only part of the mitzvah. And it says what? Davar. So just like it says ki yipol mecha davar by zakin mamrei, and we know by zakin mamrei it's only part of the mitzvah. Hu adin, when it says the nelam hadava by par helam davar, it's gzeres shava, that what? It means part of the mitzvah, not the whole mitzvah. So we have three limudim. Either the mem, we have chizkiya what mitzvos or mitzvahs, and then we have what? We have Rav Ashi saying that what zakin mamrei. Afay rodav, just like Mame minadav v'lei kol davar afay rodav v'lei kol aguf. Amrav Yehuda Mishmuel. Ein bezin chayavim at sheyoyra b'dava she'ein hatzedukim moedim ba. When we know that tzedaikim, they kept the Torah shebechsav, they didn't keep the Torah shebal peh. So Bezdin, in order for Bezdin to bring the parhel and dava, it has to be in something that the tzedaikim would not be moeded to, meaning it's not mafurish in the Torah. So guys, let's a little hakdama. Is Shaimeres Yavam mafurish in the Torah? Say yes. Yes. Good. Is Haitzah mafurish in the Torah? Yes. Is not to bow down to Avodah Zarah mafurish in the Torah? Yes. So if all these things that tzedaikim would be moeda, and you're telling me the rule of thumb is you only bring the helam dava on something that tzedaikim won't be moeda to, then the Mishnah makes no sense. Because all the Mishnah, all those three cases are mafurish in the Torah, and Mamela, the tzedaikim are moeda to that. So the Gemara is going to fine-tune, guys, every case. We're going to fine-tune, in other words, we're going to fine-tune it to a point that the tzedaikim won't be moeda. We're going to fine-tune it to the point that tzedaikim won't be moeda. Okay. Aval b'davar shet tzedaikim moeda, but pturin. My timer, zil koybe ravu. You're going to go ahead. It's like in Mamoida, you of course, go ask the yeshiva. There's no thing of Shabbos. Come on. You know, anything that you could ask in yeshiva that any little kiddie will tell you, you're pata. That's like in Mamoida to that. Yesh nida b'tayra. Okay, now. Tanan. Yesh nida b'tayra. Aval abal shemeres yoim keneged yoim pata. That's his psak. And what did we say? You're going to bring on that, you're going to bring what? You're going to bring a carbon. 1 second, I'm getting smoke in my house. Okay, so now, here's the problem. You're telling me that what? You're telling me that what? Yesh need a b'tayra. Abba shemeres yom keneged yom is pata. V'mai shemeres yom keneged yom haksiv. It says v'safra loy. So in the Torah it says v'im tahara mizayva. If she's tahara from a zayv, v'safra la shivas yamim v'achet taru. If you look in Vayikra Tesvav in the Pasha of Zav, it says v'safra. She's going to count keneged the days, guys. So you see that shemeres yoimat is min ha-Torah. If shemeres yoim is min ha-Torah, so you should not bring a helam davar. It should be no difference than nida. Good. Once the tzedaikim are moeda to okay, says the Gemara. You count one day connected the day you saw. It says the Gemara. The Amri Bezdin said hara sharia. Gemar bia hu dasira. Here was, guys. We know there's two parts to bia, right? The first part is called hara. The second part is gemar bia. Do you know what they said? They didn't say shemeres yom keneged yoim is mutter. They said hara is mutter. Why? When the Torah, in other words, they fine tune this. All they know is that. Okay, so here's what they said. You know that shemeres yom keneged yom, the Torah that says that's only is gemar bia, but hara, which does not say in the Torah, that you'll go with, and if it doesn't say in the Torah, this is like I'm not moeded to it, that you'll be chayev the parhel and dava. So that was the psak. When the Mishnah said shemeres yom keneged yoim, it said they mated hara, right, and they asked it gemar bia. Fred Gemara Namiksiv, hara also says the pasuk says es mekoira, the pasuk in the isha sheyishka v'sisha dava v'gila servasa es mekoira ra. This is by Anida. It says that what the lashon hara. So what did you gain? It's also keneged a mefurish pasuk in the Torah. Now this is not by Shemeres Yavam. This is Shemeres Yom. It's by Anida Mamish. But the assumption is that hara So the Gemara answers right away. The Amri Esmukari Hara says the Amri Kidarka Asira Shaloi Kidarka Sharia. Okay, so we change it around. A Shemeres Yom Kinega Yom. If there's what if there's it's even Hara is Asa. Guys, watch. Shemeres Yom Kinega Yom Hara would be Asa because it says Hara, yeah, by Nida. So you know what they matted? Shemeres Yom Kinega Yom Shaloi Kidarka. Abia Kedarka, that's what the Torah means. But Shaloi Kedarka, that's mutter. So that's what they matted. They're going to bring a carbon on that. Fred the Gemara, Ksiv Mishkeveisha. The lashon of the pasuk is V'ish isha sheyishkeve zacha mishkeveisha. What does mishkeve mean? Lyings mishkeve. It's two. What's the mishkeve? Echad Kedarka, v'echad Shaloi Kedarka. So l'chayr it's mefurish in the Torah that a bia shaloi kedarka would be asa. So where's your case that Bezdin is going to bring a carbon on? Says the Gemara, the Amri kedarka asa afilu bahara, b'shaloi kedarka gemar bia huda asa. So shemeres yoim guys shaloi kedarka hara would be muta. Shemeres yoim of the Mishnah is shaloi kedarka and hara. Aval hara sharia. Ihachi afilu nidanami. Oh, it's geshmak, guys. Guys, where does it say a rabbi? It says a rabbi nida, right? You're telling me shemeres yavam shaloi kedarka would be what? Would be a psak that they would bring a carbon on. So why do you have to go to shemeres yom keneged yom, which is seeing after the 7 days? Afilu a nida shaloi kedarka behara should be asa. So why do you have to go to shemeres yom keneged yom? Says the Gemara, okay, I feel nida nami elo lo olam kedarka. While we're speaking, Shemeres Yom is Kedarka. Uda Armi Hara, I said Hara. That's Beisha Davahu Diksiva. As I pointed out to you, that pasuk is not by Shemeres Yom. That pasuk is by Nida. So there is no pasuk that says that a Shemeres Yom Hara is Asa. That's a limud. If they would pass, and therefore the tzedakah would be Maida. Therefore, if Bezdin would paskin by a shemeres yoim keneged yoim, right? That hara would be what? Would be muta. That wouldn't be going against the Torah according to the tzedakah, because hara was said by isha dava, was said by Anida. So again, you see the fine tuning over here, guys. To go ahead and say shemeres yoim, right, is muta, that you can't say. Okay, now v'ba yisema the ama zav lehavi ela biyamame. Kol Zayva. Good. In other words, when is she a shemeres yom keneged yom? Is only if she saw blood during the day. What happens if she says blood at night? No. Tzedakah would agree, right? So if they went ahead and matted a shemeres yom keneged yom who saw blood at night, they said, no, you know what? You saw blood at night, you're not a shemeres yom keneged yom. That would be being oikad of minat ayra. That's not tzedakah ma'mayda. So we have two pshatim in the Mishnah. When our Mishnah says shemeres yom keneged yom, it doesn't mean. It means hara. They matted hara. Gemarbi is a problem. Hara is not a problem. Why? Because hara it says by nida, not by shemeres yom keneged yom. So they're not moided to that. Or it says that you see blood by day. Then you have to be shemeres yom keneged yom. They said, you know what? If you see blood by night, you don't have to be shemeres yom keneged yom. That's pshat, not Mishnah. And those are things that tzedakah would be moida, and therefore that's on that type of psak. Right? And that type of psak, Bezdin is going to bring a parhelam dava. Okay, now we have to do the same thing by Shabbos, the same analysis by Shabbos, and the same analysis by what? By Avodah Zarah. Okay. Tran. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. There's the din of Shabbos b'Torah. Aval amaitzi mishus l'shus pata. That's the case Yechayev. V'amai haitzah. Now, guys, it's very fascinating. Where do we learn out the 39 Mamas Malachis? From the Mishkan. Statement in the Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah. It's a hekesh in Pashas Vayakel where they bring in the beginning of the parsha that the kol malacha le'sasu, which malacha? Anything that's compared. However, there is one. Haitzah is a pasuk. So it's interesting. Of all the pasuk you could have brought, you brought Haitzah. Of all the others, Haitzah is talking in the Torah. It says the Frag Gemara Ksiva le'soitzim misham v'teichem. It says. Le'soitzim masam v'teichem b'yom Shabbos. Who is it? Who do you think is calling? Hi, Yitz. Guess what? Guess what, Yitzi? Of course I'm in the middle of share. But what's the Shiloh?
It was finished. Sorry.
We have to give him brownie points for consistency, right? You would think after 33 years or whatever, I don't know, no, he was 3 years old. He was 3 years old when we started share. Can you imagine? It's crazy. It's crazy. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, you think he'd learn? Okay. Anyway, so Geshmak. It says Haitzah by Shabbos. So guys, what's the kasha? Since it says Haitzah by Shabbos, it's something that Tzedaikim would be moided to. If Tzedaikim would be moided to, you don't bring a parhel and dava. Yet our Mishnah is giving that as an example of a parhel and dava. Right? Our Mishnah is giving that as an example. The Amar Haitzah. Okay, and for the Gemara, the Amar. What do they say? Haitzah hu the asar hachnasa muta. Haitzah means taking out. Hachnasa means bringing in. That the tzedaikim are not moided to. Again, the tzedaikim are literal. Not literal, lol, they're literal. They're very literal. That you go ahead and you take it out. Now we know it goes both ways. Oni bachutz, balabayis b'fnim. We know that first Mishnah in Shabbos. V'bay Sema, the Amri Haitzah, Hu Dasiri, Moishit v'Zoyrik Shari. You know what? Taking it out, but sticking it out like this or throwing it out. The tzedaikim are not moided to that because it says Haitzah. Okay, so that's the case of the Mishnah. Case of the Mishnah by Shabbos, either Achnasa or throwing it. And they paskin that it's muta. On that, they were going to have to go ahead and bring a carbon parhel and dava. Yesha by this chachavim b'tayra, avlam mishtachve pata, v'amay ishtachve hoksiva d'chsiv le'ishtachve le'el acher. So b'chayr you have pretty much first pasuk. So the tzedaikim would be moida. You can't bow down. So how can you give that as an example? It says Mardami ki asiri ishtachve kidarka. If ishtachve is that's the normal way of serving the avodah zarah. Avol shaloi kidarka sharia. Guys, you bow down to Markulis. You bow down to Balapar. Right? What do we remember from avodah zarah? That's not darke bekach. So therefore they paskin. If you bow down to that, it's mutter. We know it's asa, right? Bow down to that, it's mutter. Tzedaikim would be moided to that, and therefore you bring a parhel and dava. By saying madami ishtachve gufa kidarka, who the asa? Only if you bow down normally. The ispe pisha yidayim reglayim, when you stretch out your hands and your feet. Ishtachve the less by pisha yidayim. If you bow down without stretching out your hands and feet, sharia, you say it's mutter, and therefore what? And therefore, that's you would be what chayev a carbon. That you would be chayev a carbon. Okay, very good. So boy Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef, the following question: Ein charisha b'Shabbos. Now it doesn't say in the Torah. It doesn't say charish b'Shabbos. It doesn't say that. Good, but what they say there's no din of it's not us to plow on Shabbos. What would the din be? Would they have to bring a parhel and davar or not? Mi arminon. Kivon de moida bikula milsa, since they're moida in Shabbos, there's such a thing called Shabbos. Kibitul mixas v'kiyam mixas dami. It's keeping Shabbos and uprooting something else. By Dilma, kivon de akrin leila charisha kolika, since they're taking out a whole avoida, is kakiras guftami. It's like taking it out. In other words, I can say if you're saying there's no such thing as charisha, it's like saying there's no such thing as Shabbos. Do we view it as, I was moided to the rest of Shabbos and I just took out this one prat? Or since this one prat is one of the malachas of Shabbos, it's like I'm taking out the whole thing. That was his shaila. What's the halacha over there? So Toshma yesh nida b'toira aval habal shemeres yom k'neged yom prata. V'amai ha'akrayim l'shemeres yom k'neged yom kol ikah. Okay, guys, let's play SAT. Let's play SAT. Charisha is to Shabbos, like blank is to Nida. Charisha is to Shabbos, like Shemeres Yom is Keneged Nida, right? And what do we say by Shemeres Yom? We said that what? Yechayev. So l'chayr we can answer Yeshayla that Bezdin would be chayev a helam davar on that. So I'm like Rabbi Yosef, Shemeres Yom de ka'amrit kiddushanin. You know what? No, you're not uprooting Shemeres Yom. You're saying the Shemeres Yom is speaking where you saw blood during the day, or hara. In other words, there was a pitch of gut. It wasn't, you didn't just uproot it. You didn't say there's a din of Harisha. You didn't say there's no din of Shemeres Yom. You said, in Shemeres Yom, you gave a heta. But that's not a good sushtel to what I want to answer. Guys, You want to say there's no din of Charish at all. The Havamina of the Gemara is there's no din of Shemeres Yom at all. But we said that's not true. That's not true. The Tzedaikim would be mighty is the din of Shemeres Yom. Elama, Shemeres Yom, like we answered up. Right? We answered up. It's speaking by nighttime, it's speaking by Ra. We answered different. Tashma, the same thing. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah, avamoisim rishus hayachal rishus rabin pata. V'amai ha'akrayin lahoitzi kolikar. So guys, what's the difference? You take out, what's the difference if you take out Charisha or if you take out Haitzah? So I took out Haitzah, I'm Chayiv. If I take out Charisha, I'm also Chayiv. The Bezdin would be Chayiv. What's the answer? You didn't take out Haitzah, right? You fine-tuned it. You threw it in, you stretched it out. Hasanami Kiddushaninun. Okay, now the third case. Tashma Yesha B'Yis Kachavim B'Torah Avam Shtachave Pata V'Mai V'Akrayin L'Shtachave Kolika. L'Chayre, you took out a chelik component. So and you see nonetheless that what Bezdin would bring the carbon. So Amri Yishtachave Nami Kiddushanin. In the same teretz is speaking with what you bow down Gedarko, or you bow down what, or you bow down and there was no and you didn't do Pisha Yadayim Reglayim. So you weren't Pisha that Shaila. Boy Reb Zera. Ain't Shabbos b'Shvius. Now this is a Londish Shaila. Maybe in the Shemitah year, there's no din of Shabbos. In other words, 6 years, you keep Shabbos. The 7th year, there's no din of Shabbos. And maybe, guys, what is that? You're Mekayim Miktsas, Ubatal Miktsas. You're Mekayim Miktsas, and you're Batal Miktsas. Now, why would you have such a Shaila, right? Why would you have such a Shaila? Okay, so it's Tashma. What's the Shaila? Boy Reb Zera, Ein Shabbos b'Shviyas Mal. B'Maita, B'Hadin Kra. You're going to go ahead and this pasuk. B'Chorish u'B'Kotza Tishbais. It says by the Shemitah year, Sheishes Yomim Tavoid u'Yom Shvi Tishbais. B'Chorish u'B'Kotza Tishbais. Okay, we have Machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. What's it speaking about? Chavisha Shel V'Shus, Mitzvah Shel V'Shus. We have that's a whole sugya b'fnei atzmai. But what's the over here? Boy Reb Zera, Ain't Shabbos b'Shviyas Mal. B'Maitai. B'Chorish u'B'Kotza Tishbais. B'Zman De'ikah Chavisha. When you're allowed to go ahead, what, and plow, Ikka Shabbos. So for 6 years, can I plow? Yeah. And is there Shabbos? Yes. Ubizman deleka charisha. And maybe there's man when you can't plow, like the Shemitah year, leka Shabbos. So mi amrinon, kivin the mekaimalo b'shar shnei shavua, since they keep Shabbos for 6 years, kibitol mixas ukia, mixas dami, and they bring a par helam davar. Idilma kivin to akrayin le b'shvius. Since they uprooted in the Shemitah year, they uprooted the whole thing. Kakiras guftami. In other words, guys, eye contact. Guys, look at me. In the case of Shameres Yom, in the case of Shabbos by Haitzah, in the case of Avodah Zarah, you didn't uproot those 3 halachas. You went ahead and you over here when you don't keep it, you're not keeping it in Gansen. You're not saying that in the Shemitah I'll keep a part of Shabbos. You're not keeping anything of Shabbos. So there's 2 ways to view it. Since I'm moeded to Shabbos 6 years and this year, so maybe par helam davar shel tzibur. Or no, when I uproot it, I am uprooting it. It says in the Torah that you have to keep Shabbos. And you're telling me that what? In the Shemitah year, you don't have to keep Shabbos? And you're saying completely. And you're not fine-tuning it with some type of shot like we did by Haitzah, that it's Moshe or Achnasa, right? So that's the Shaila. So I'm Ravina Toshma. Says Ravina. Let's go what? Toshma, Ravina is going to answer. Ravina is going to answer the Shaila. Okay? Navi shenis nave laka dava midivrei Torah chayev. You have a Navi Sheker, and he tells you to go ahead what? And keep, and one of the mitzvahs in the Torah says don't keep, he's chayiv misa. Lebittel miktsas l'kiyah miktsas. If he goes there and says keep part of it and don't do the other part of it, Reb Shimon mepata. Reb Shimon says you pata. However, even if it says today keep it and tomorrow not, chayiv. So what do you see? When you're mevatel a whole thing, you're chayiv. When you mevatel the whole thing, it's being oiked the whole thing. Shma mina. If they said Ein Shabbos v'Shviyas, it's Kebittel Miktsas v'Kiyah Miktsas Dami, right? Shma Mina. When the Navi Sheker guys is going to be chayev for what? For saying, oh, no Avodah Zarah this day, but yes Avodah Zarah this day. It's the same thing as yes Shabbos this day, no Shabbos that day. And nonetheless, what? It's considered bittul mixes Yechayev. The Mela, we can be pushed to the Shaila, Shmamina, we hear from here, we're pushed to the Shaila. Okay, we could do the last Rashi on that Nakuda, I think is very nice. Okay, the last Rashi, says Rashi, the Hainu Kiyam Mixas, Ubatal Mixas. The Avodas Kechavim Chayiv, the Rachmana Omar, Ladi Chacham Min HaDerech. Then afilu mixas derech, even part of the derech. U'ba'avodas kechavim hu dichsiv, dafka by avodas zara. V'chi ketani chayiv kegoyin l'rabbanon b'skila u'rav shimon b'chenek. V'hachim mitaris l'rav Chisda b'perek el nefachim. V'yoyim ovdo u'lamacha batla ke'ein Shabbos b'shvius. Dami, it's like Shabbos and Shvius. V'korelei bittul mixas v'kiyam mixas. Shmami, no, you have a raya that if you take away a whole part, as long as you keep the other part, you would be chayiv.